Thank you, Jill, and thanks everybody for attending. I know this is a hot topic right now, just virtual meetings in general. You know, we're still obviously in the midst of the pandemic, and so I'm hoping that this information can be valuable to you. Obviously, we can't get into every last thing and detail about Teams, so make sure you ask your questions, and if we want, we can also have one-on-ones after the fact, which we'll talk about later. So. Anyway, just a brief introduction. So everybody who's logged in here today has some kind of personal investment in meetings. I think that's a fairly safe thing to say. This year, when the pandemic happened, virtual meetings were normalized. I mean, I can only think of how things were for me in 2019, which is that in general, if I was having a meeting with somebody, I was having that meeting in person. You know, conference calls were limited to maybe brief introductions or review sessions and things like that. But if you had something important to go over, you know, you were meeting in person with someone generally, and now that's been totally flipped on its head. In this year, there was just a flood of people to these platforms. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more later. Teams and Zoom gained a huge user base and competition. So there's more platforms that are popping up out there. You probably saw in the spring of last year, even when the stock market was going down, Zoom stock was flying upwards. Obviously, it's been very profitable for Microsoft as well. And this rush, you know, this huge push on these platforms has forced them to make the products better. I think early on, especially with Teams and Zoom, there were a little bit of technical problems as they gained these huge regular user bases as opposed to people who sort of casually use them. And of course, as people started adopting them, the things they wanted became that much more clear. So even after this is all over, you know, Teams has seen significant upgrades, and this is going to continue into 2021. We'll talk about it today. I mean, I don't think, you know, my personal feeling is that even when we get past all this stuff, I think people are still going to want to have virtual meetings. I think a lot of people have got used to them. There's obviously a lot of efficiencies and a lot that can be gained from engaging virtually. So I think it's really important today that honestly, if you're doing business and having engagement with clients or prospects or anything like that, that you really be masters of these platforms across your staff. So today's agenda, just to go through what we're going to talk about. First is the history of Teams up through 2020. I think it's sort of important to sort of see the past as prologue for this kind of thing. We're going to talk about some features that you should know about right now. You know, things. This is what the product has right now. A lot of people, I think, use this platform and don't even know what's available to them today. So let's go over that a little bit. I'm going to talk about apps within Teams. So just like your iPhone or your Android phone, there are little apps that make the experience different. You know, we're going to get into Teams as a platform as opposed to purely an instant messaging or virtual meeting tool. We're going to get into a little bit about the Teams roadmap and how this is a response to the market. So, you know, Microsoft releases regularly new functions that they're going to add to the platform, and they publish the stuff, but I'm going to highlight a few things on that. We'll also talk about what might be coming that hasn't been confirmed. So obviously, in this sort of environment, there's going to be features that haven't even been announced yet that are probably going to come in the future. And then, of course, your questions and answers. So here we go. So up until now, there's really a long time where Microsoft was pursuing communications. So I've been working in managed IT services since 2005. I remember all the various forms of Link and Skype for Business and things like that that were out there. These things really didn't get, I think, a hold in the way that Teams did. You know, Microsoft, you know, again, if you think about their history as a company, tons of success in the operating system space, in office productivity, in databases and things like that. But really, we're just scratching the surface on communications. Does anyone remember Link? That was another product that was out there, and they've tried to get into this business for a long time. Afterwards, you know, Slack a couple years ago was being targeted by Microsoft for acquisition. But Microsoft at the time already owned Skype for Business, and so instead they just opted to compete directly with Slack. For those of you who have been paying attention recently, you might have noticed that Salesforce actually purchased Slack. So you can see that there's these sort of this divergence that's being created. So Microsoft, with their platforms, they're going to try and work with Dynamics and Office and all these other products along with Teams as a platform to work on it. Whereas you're seeing the Salesforces trying to, the software as a service platforms trying to gobble up, and augment their service with other tools. So. There's a key part where integration and exclusivity with Office 365 was a key. So Microsoft moved towards Office as a service. Everybody remembers they used to buy the big jewel case, and it might even cost hundreds and hundreds of dollars for a CD in it with a key. And that's how you got Microsoft Office, and that's what you would have on your computer for the life of your computer. Maybe you'd replace it when you got a new machine. Well, Microsoft really pushed that away, and now Office 365 is the Office suite, as well as the email hosting platform, as well as a variety of other tools that make Office more of a service that you pay a subscription for per month. And Microsoft made it a point that if you wanted to get Teams, you were going to need to get into this Office 365 ecosystem, which turned out, I think, to be a pretty wise move on their part. Skype for Business was announced for a full phase out completely by July 2021. I believe right now you can't, if I'm not mistaken, and to be honest, I don't spend a lot of time buying Skype for Business, but I don't think you can even get Skype for Business now. I think they're just phasing it out for people who have it. So it's going away. Skype, the platform, will still exist, just the business portion is going away. And to give you a sense of how Teams has grown, so in July of 2019, there were 13 million users on Teams, which is a pretty good number, pretty respectable. I remember, if you, again, looking back at July of 2019, I would use Teams a lot as I traveled to communicate back in the home office, for things that were going on in Baltimore while I was out in Chicago or San Diego or something like that. And it was very useful. I could stay in touch with people like Jill, talk about my slide deck, what I'm working on for this month, while I was meeting with people in person, and that was a good fit, but obviously it was kind of a niche product. Fast forward to November 2019, and they went from 13 million users to 20 million users. So this is even before the pandemic occurred. We're talking, what is that? Something about maybe 60% growth in a matter of 4 or 5 months. So a big piece of growth even before COVID-19 happened. So fast forward to March 19th, 2020 specifically, and then you can tell that that's basically about the time where lockdowns and shutdowns were starting to happen. They went immediately to 44 million users. And then in April, so less than a month later, they went to 75 million users. So that was significant growth in just a matter of a couple weeks. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I read something just a couple days ago after I wrote this deck. I think they're at 115 million regular users now. So, my view is that Microsoft had this really good product that was sort of ready for a market that needed it. Sometimes the product comes first and then the market comes later. That's kind of where Microsoft was positioned on it. And one thing I tell people is that it's fortunate for a lot of businesses, not every business obviously, but it's fortunate for a lot of businesses that this product was around when the pandemic started, and that we weren't looking at this back in, say, 2005 even, which wasn't like we were in the Stone Age exactly, but these kind of unified platforms for working remotely and virtually just weren't as available. So let's talk a little bit about the features you should be comfortable with right now. And as I go through these, obviously I'm not going to get into everything that Microsoft Teams does. And we don't really have enough time for me to break down each individual thing, and here's how you do it. So I'm going to mention this in the end, but I'll mention it right now. If you want to talk one-on-one, maybe about how these things work or get them a little more familiarity, I'm happy to have a follow-up. So make sure you get my email address at the end. We can talk about that. So anyway, the first thing is screen sharing. One of my favorite features. Joe can tell you that right before we did this call, we had our weekly management meeting. We went over just to give you guys a little transparency, I guess that's okay. We go over some statistics on the business, what we're doing, what's going on, and go around the room and talk about, where we need to take the business for the next week. So I'm always sharing my screen where I show some of the numbers and where things are going. And it's incredibly useful. You can zoom in, people can collaborate together with that screen share. Very, very nice stuff. Now they have cascaded webcams. So this is fairly new. I think in even early on, when you go back to that sort of March 2020 time frame, there were some pretty significant limitations to how many cameras you could even have at one time. Now they're moving more towards that Zoom situation where you can have more and more and more cams all gathering a feed at the same time, which is really nice, especially when you're trying to replicate the feeling of meeting in person. Permissions and guest access. So one thing we do is we have client meetings or maybe prospect meetings. We can send invites. It doesn't really matter to who it is. I don't need to know whether you have Teams or not. And it doesn't matter whether you're in my organization or not. But I can send an invite to you and have a Teams meeting with you as long as you have a web browser or some kind of compatible device. Really easy to do. And then, of course, I can admit you into this meeting so that people maybe who are not necessarily trusted don't get into the meeting and start seeing sensitive information. Furthermore, you can build in permissions to this stuff. So let's say you're having a meeting and you want to share a specific file with only people on your team as opposed to a guest. These sorts of things can be done. And that's a really nice feature of Microsoft Teams that's really worth getting used to. You have the Files tab. So again, more how we make the sausage kind of thing. Me and Jill and our colleague Giselle, we are often sharing files directly through Teams. I write a slide deck about things we want to present for the month. I share that with Jill and Giselle in Teams, which is utilizing the 365 backend for SharePoint or OneDrive. And they are able to mark that stuff up, make changes, make suggestions. That file is then shared with me within the Files tab. I can open up that file within Teams itself. So if I want to just view it without actually opening up the entire file, I can do that for a variety of different file types. Other purposes, for example, when I set up clients with the Fish Alert button and they're having a problem, I can send them the installer file directly through Teams. They can open it up. They can share their screen so I can walk them through what they need to do to install it. There's all sorts of neat things you can do with this stuff. So learn how to share files with Teams. It could be quite helpful. Now we have blurred and virtual backgrounds. So there's a variety of features here. I think it's really nice to have. I know not everybody has maybe the most appealing background when they're doing their virtual meetings. Maybe they're broadcasting from their closet or their kids' playroom or something like that. Well, it's really nice to have a virtual background where you can maybe have, the DP Solutions logo, or even if you just want to be goofy about it, they have a variety of things like a halo background and stuff like that. Worth figuring out. It doesn't work perfectly. Obviously, you tend to have some cutoff, like sometimes my chair cuts through the virtual background or something like that, but at least you get a nice professional look. Meeting notes, whiteboards. So again, another key thing about Teams, and I think one way in which it benefits as opposed to having more traditional meetings, is that you can take notes within a meeting. Let's say I schedule a meeting and we have 10 people there, and we want to take meeting notes or minutes, or I have a concept that we want to work on together. We can just do this within the notes of the meeting. You can even do whiteboarding where you can kind of do some virtual drawing and things like that. And what's nice is all of this stuff is saved to your 365, wherever the storage is for your 365, which is, again, SharePoint or OneDrive. And you can do a lot with these sorts of things just to collaborate and work together. I guess if you're in a meeting in real life, you might use a whiteboard where you draw on that sort of thing. But, unfortunately, with the physical whiteboard, you can't actually save or back them up. People pull out their phones and start taking pictures of a whiteboard. Well, wouldn't it be nice if you could just save that file and then view it on your computer whenever you like, or any device whenever you like? So that's a really nice feature that's worth getting used to. You also have like @mentions. I think a lot of people don't realize you can do this. If I want to get Jill's attention and she's got a million conversations and different teams open that she collaborates with, but I want to get Jill's attention, I can @Jill Rose, and she'll get the little notification that, hey, Ben is trying to get in touch with you. You should get back to him, and that can be quite helpful. Or if you have a specific directive, you have 5 people in your team, but you want, Joe Smith to be able to respond to you, you can just that specific person and they'll get that notification. So a really nice thing to have. As I said, if you're wanting to learn about any of these features or others, you want to talk about this stuff, make sure you drop something in the Q&A or send me an email and we can have that offline conversation. I'm going to pivot a bit towards apps and Teams. So I think a lot of people don't even know that apps exist in Teams, or they see the little icon and maybe they're intimidated by it, so they don't look at it. But apps have allowed Teams to become a platform for work as opposed to a simple chat voice meeting tool. I think a lot of people think, well, I mean, how is this apps? You know, I have an iPhone and I download apps for that. This is just a collaboration thing. This is just where I do chat. But I think people are forgetting that these applications are meant to be more where you start to do your work as opposed to simply a chatting tool. So there are many partner or Microsoft integrated apps. So Microsoft has, for example, OneNote, where you could have the OneNote application integrated within Teams with just a few clicks. It's very easy to do. Again, this is something I could walk you through if you wanted to find out. But if you go into the little apps button, you could just do a basic text search, or you can browse the store and just literally add these apps, much like you would add an app on a phone, and now they'll be a part of Microsoft Teams for you. There's other neat things too, like YouTube. So if you wanted to, you know, let's say for the sake of argument, you're having a meeting and and part of your meeting is you want to show this YouTube clip, you think it's really relevant to what you're talking about, you can integrate YouTube directly within your meeting. Or Trello, maybe you're in, you know, that's a project management app, maybe that's helpful for you. And these are just a few examples. I think it's something like 1,000 apps or somewhere in that is there now in terms of partner type apps. But in addition, there's also low code and professionally developed apps for data analysis and more. So, you know, let's say for the sake of argument that you can't find something in the app marketplace, I'm not sure exactly what they call it, to add to your Teams, but you have this really specific function that you think might work. There are a number of developers out there, we can certainly refer them to you, to create these low code apps for data analysis or whatever you like. So that's really helpful, and I could see that becoming a big thing in the future, where businesses try and get their own custom apps within a Teams environment and then use that as their basic basis for work. So the important thing is that the integration of apps into your Teams environment could really elevate the Teams functionality regardless of where people work or what device they use. You know, wouldn't it be nice if I could view the video, view the project management chart, see my notes, share a picture, share a file, do whiteboarding together, and all I have is an iPad that has Microsoft Teams on it. You know, that's a very powerful way of working. Now, perhaps that's an oversimplification. There's going to be things that you need maybe full-blown applications on a Windows desktop for, but the point is that this kind of service as a solution when it comes to productivity is really where the market's going in general for many things, especially commoditized functions. So the roadmap for 2021, these were things that I found from Microsoft directly. There's, I'm sure, going to be a lot more things, maybe some things that are subtle and some things not so much, or things that I haven't even anticipated or Microsoft hasn't anticipated yet. One is just layouts for meetings could be customized. You know, right now, I think if you've been on a Teams meeting, you see that usually it's everybody's cameras in a cascade format. Maybe you bring the notes to the side, etc. Well, I think one thing you're going to see is maybe you can make it so that everybody sees the OneNote thing right in the center, whereas the cameras are to the side. When I share a screen, instead of me sharing the screen and taking up the entire space, it only takes up a portion of the space. We could have different windows within that team. That's something that Microsoft's working on, and you're going to see more, I think, in the very near future. I think that's going to be a Q1 thing in 2021. You have a presented view similar to PowerPoint. So right now, obviously, you can't see it. What you see on your screen is the big display, but my PowerPoint notes are here. There's going to be a similar sort of thing for meetings. So let's say I'm organizing a Teams meeting with someone, and I have a specific agenda I want to present. I've got all my stuff all over the place, but I really only want my client to see this one document. You can do that kind of presenter view in the future with Teams. And again, I think that's a Q1 thing for at least what Microsoft is saying for 2021. I think, for me, somebody who likes to use meetings all the time, that's a really exciting feature. So I'm really looking forward to that one. It sounds silly, but meeting attendee registration Right now, when we send out a Teams invite, it's, you do get the read receipts that you can send and stuff from Outlook. You can email everybody a Microsoft Teams meeting that you want to do, and you can see who responded to that, I suppose. Meeting attendee registration is a little bit more like what we're doing today with GoToMeeting, and I suspect that's something that Microsoft's trying to go after, is saying, you don't really need this GoToMeeting thing. Maybe you want to use Teams to do your meetings, where you can do all this other stuff. There are limitations to GoToMeeting. So I think that's another place they're posturing. I think that's a little bit further down the line. I suspect there's going to be more stuff in terms of these one-to-many presentations from Teams. You also have account switching between personal and business accounts. This is something that not a lot of people probably even think about right now, but maybe you have a Teams environment for your staff. But I know for me, I'm in some business groups that are associated with the industry for MSPs, and we have our own separate Teams platform that I can switch to between DP Solutions and my Ingram TrustX Alliance stuff. And so it's a whole new platform, a whole bunch of different stuff. And now Microsoft's saying, well, we're going to extend that so that maybe you have DP Solutions as your main thing, and you switch your account to your Ben Schmerler account that you use to chat with friends. I don't know how successful this will be. I'm not sure. One thing I wonder about with the Microsoft stuff is whether people want to use the personal side of their products, or if they look at Microsoft as more of a business platform, whereas they may use Google or Discord or something for personal chats. I'm not really quite sure, but that's something coming. And then increased attendee limits. So again, this is why I think they're maybe starting to look at going after the GoToMeetings of the world, et cetera. They want to make their platform have very little limitations, and be dynamic enough so that it can be not just what it is right now, which is basic virtual meetings with the productivity, the Microsoft Office side of things, but also a full-blown business platform, a meeting registration place, your virtual video room that really goes after Zoom. I think they're looking at Teams as perhaps the platform for communications and work in the future, which is very ambitious, but I think there's a lot to be said for that. Whether all of these things work out, whether they're all good features or not, that remains to be seen. One thing I could say, as I've been doing this for a while, is a lot of things sound good and they plan out, and then as you develop them or as they get adopted or new competitors come by, some things fall to the wayside. So we'll see how this goes as we move into the future. So what else is coming? These are somewhat speculative. Some of this is based on research I made. Some of this is just stuff I would guess. I think the interface and look of the product could maybe improve a little bit. I think you're going to see more of that stuff. I just think that I'm not a user interface person. It's not like I'm an expert at this stuff, but it feels a little Spartan right now. And I think that they could do things to make it a little bit easier to use. I mentioned earlier that some of these features that people should know now, a lot of people don't know. And I think part of the reason that people don't know these features is maybe that the interface isn't as friendly as it could be, so that people would naturally discover this stuff. So I think we'll see some changes there. I'd expect also more calling features and more phone system features. Microsoft has been trying to get into the communication space. If they're going to get rid of Skype for Business, I expect them to lean even more on that. Right now, you can already call, I didn't mention this earlier, but you can create dial-ins to meetings. So let's say somebody wants to attend a Teams meeting and they don't even want to use the Teams app or something like that. There is a way to call in and listen to the meeting. I would expect that to be even more tightly integrated in the platform. Another speculative thing on my part, I said Salesforce purchased Slack. Could we see an increased focus on CRM? So Microsoft has Dynamics right now. I think there has to be, if you're trying to think like a business person, maybe Microsoft says, well, if Salesforce wants to go after the integrated communication side, maybe we should be leaning more on this platform we have to provide CRM services to small businesses. And Dynamics is a really good CRM in terms of customization, but it doesn't have the broader market appeal, I think, that a Salesforce has right now. So I think you could maybe see something like that down the line. Again, I don't know for a fact. This is speculation on my part, but I think you could see it. There's also a lot of talk, and this is not speculation, that Microsoft wants to get more into, as they make this a working platform, that they want to lean into more of making Teams the work from home platform. And a big part of this was virtual learning. So I think Microsoft has made statements that they recognize the challenges that a lot of students are having right now, learning remotely, and maybe even using Zoom for these things. And Microsoft says, well, look, if you have students that need to work in Microsoft Word and do all of this other stuff, and we can get these tailored apps and APIs and make low-code things that other education partners can get involved with, we want Microsoft Teams to be a virtual learning platform, the way people work. And there's really not a lot of reason they can't do it, aside from making the total ecosystem that I think an educator would want. So I think that's going to be a big thing in 2021. Now, obviously, I think there's a huge push to get students back in school and have in-person learning. But even one thing we should all keep in mind is that even beyond the pandemic, one thing we've been talking about is a new normal, as opposed to the or the next normal, as opposed to a normal that we're settling for. And there are people, for example, in rural areas, or people who need specialized education, where I think the idea of doing virtual learning is going to be more and more appealing as the platforms improve and allow for that. So expect to see that into the future, I think. So in terms of wrapping up our prepared content for now, and again, this is, we'll get into the questions in a second. I mean, I really feel I don't have any stake in the game. I don't have Microsoft stock or anything like that, but I think that Microsoft really has a great platform in Teams. It's been incredibly useful for me. First, as somebody who traveled a lot and really engaged with virtual work before the pandemic, I thought it was really a great thing, and it's been invaluable to me during the pandemic. So I don't see any reason why we don't still see growth in the platform, both in terms of users and features. Your team really needs to, or your staff really needs to, look at Teams or another platform. Maybe you're not in love with the product like I am, for virtual meetings and collaboration as necessary to work with into the future, just like they look at for Outlook or other technology products. We tend to focus on what we lost as a result of the pandemic. That I can't, excuse me, that I can't meet with someone, or I can't go in person or do these things that we did before. But one thing I talk about with Teams is, isn't it nice that if you wanted to present to 10 different people your proposal, instead of printing out 10 different versions of this thing, stuffing the notebooks, filling up your bag, handing everything out, walking everything through, stapling everything together, doing all this stuff, isn't it nice that we can use an electronic platform for this, or we don't have to create as much waste or work doing preparation and stuff like that? This is an important tool, and using it and mastering it shows not just, it's not going to just make you more efficient, but I think it's also going to make you look more professional and more engaged, and more of a valuable asset working with your clients into the future. So I really think if you haven't made your team fully comfortable with these platforms, I think it's worth investing that time to really get people trained up and working in it. So yeah, we're happy to take questions. I mentioned earlier that if you're interested in learning more, or you want to schedule a demo of Teams or anything like that, we're happy to engage with you. You can reach out to me, you can reach out to Jill, and you can contact me. Here's my contact information. We're also, while we're here, I want to talk a little bit about what we're going to plan for January for our webinar. So I'm sure everybody on this call has heard about stuff going on recently with high-profile cyber attacks. We have the stuff that happened in Baltimore, like Baltimore County Public Schools, as well as GBMC. I know they made headlines, and we recently wrote a blog that you can check out on our website about lessons you can learn from those attacks. I sent something out yesterday on this. But also we have attacks on SolarWinds, which is a monitoring platform. I know a lot of people who maybe aren't in the technology space might not know as much about SolarWinds as we do, but They're a major player. You also have the FireEye breach, where it has been suggested that that a state actor, probably Russia, stole hacking tools from FireEye, which they'll use for other breaches. And there have been breaches on, for sure, on the U.S. Treasury and Commerce departments, with some suggestion that maybe the SolarWinds breach may have had some impact there as well. So, as an individual, I know there's a tendency to say, well, look at all this stuff that's happening. What can I do about it? And we want to talk about that. Just because you're not directly involved in these high-profile attacks, it doesn't mean that there isn't stuff we can take away to make our risk profile that much better. So we're going to talk a lot about that. And I'm sure by the time this webinar happens, we're going to have a whole lot more facts that can be shared about it and grow from. So anyway, with that, I know I've been talking a bit. Jill, what questions do we have? Where can we go from here?
Yes, thank you. So as a reminder, if you want to pop your questions into the question box, we'll go ahead and read those out. And our first question is, can I schedule a Teams meeting with someone who doesn't have Teams installed?
Absolutely. So if they have an email account, you can schedule a Teams meeting with them. If you've got Teams in your platform and you have Outlook, for example, one easy way to do it is you just do new email, just like you do any other email. You pop in all the email addresses into the to or the CC, give it a subject, and then you'll have a button that says new Teams meeting, and it'll create a link to a meeting. And of course, once you do that, you'll want to schedule it just like you schedule a calendar event. The person on the other end gets a email which they confirm. It goes on their calendar, whether it's the Microsoft system with Outlook, or perhaps they're using Google or some other platform. They still get that calendar invite, and within the calendar invite, there's a little link that says join Teams meeting, and it'll give them, if they don't have a platform, it'll give them a web-based version. Since they would probably be guests, you'd probably have to admit them. Once they join the meeting, you'll see a little thing that says, hey, so-and-so is in the lobby. Would you like to admit them? You just click admit, and then they're in. But yeah, you can do it. We do it all the time, and I'd recommend it. I like to do it because it helps us tell people what a great platform this is. So anyway, yes, you can do it, and I would recommend it.
Okay, great. Is it safe to share classified documents through Microsoft Teams?
So classified is loaded. So you have to be very careful when you're talking about things that are classified. I assume people don't mean classified in the nuclear secrets kind of thing, but classified in the HR department sense. So we'll operate with that. The more sensitive the data, the more careful you have to be about sending it. Keep in mind, when you're sending a document through Teams, you're basically putting it into a SharePoint or OneDrive backend that Microsoft is using to host it. And so that is going to go out first over the public web to go to Microsoft. So we need to make sure that there's some kind of encryption between you and the destination. You also have to keep in mind who you're sharing these things with. If you're admitting a lot of guests into your Teams meeting and then you're sharing a file with them, who knows what's happening on the other end with them, or if you have identity verification. If something is particularly sensitive and you're sharing it with a third party, I'd probably recommend not using Microsoft Teams to do that. I just think that it's a little too risky and hard to control. If you're just sending a private document internally within your organization, you have the proper VPNs and other encryption solutions set up, then yes, chances are it's pretty safe to use for that function. I do think that this is the type of thing that should be discussed as you adopt the platform. What kind of files do you want to share, and work with your technology provider, whether it's DP Solutions or someone else, to say, here are the things we would like to share, here are the people we would like to share them with, and what's the right solution. And the answer may be a couple of things depending on the sensitivity of the data that's being shared. So I guess my answer is yes, but the answer is yes, but that's under a certain number of conditions. And this is the type of thing that really should be talked about on a more strategic and individual level.
Okay, great. All right, next question. I always have trouble sharing files. Only people in my organization can open them. How do I share files in a meeting chat with all attendees?
I I probably want to have a one-on-one conversation about that because I'd like to learn more about the nature of the issue. Uh, I can't 100% say for sure. What it sounds like to me is that you probably have some sort of file. There's either data loss prevention or some kind of system in place, maybe access control that says on the back end that files that are shared within Teams are only able to be shared within perhaps my domain, people within my domain name. So if it was dpsolutions.com, that this file can only be shared with other people with those email addresses, and that's how they authenticate them and allow that sharing. That's my guess. It could be a number of other things. It could be that you're sharing them with somebody with a third party who's having some kind of browser issue, and maybe you're sending it to them, but they're just not able to get it because there's a bug or something like that, which is obviously a much more fundamental issue to resolve. I'm not quite sure, but I'm sure we could figure it out.
Yeah, and I think we could probably reach out after this webinar, try to figure out what that issue is.
Yeah, but that's a good question.
Okay, great. Another question came in, is Teams only available through my browser?
No, I mean, there's an app. So there's the actual application, the desktop application that you can get that runs just like Outlook, that runs just like Word or PowerPoint or anything else in the Microsoft suite. You've got on phones, you've got the Teams app. I have an Android phone, works on my phone. There's one for iPhone, I'm pretty sure. I don't use BlackBerry anymore. I guess there's probably one for BlackBerry if people even still use that. And other platforms. The Teams app on the phone is really good, actually, and very, very functional and stable. And it has a lot of the alerts and stuff that you would expect from these kinds of apps. So, if somebody messages me on Teams, I get a little buzz on my phone, just like a SMS, and that's really helpful. And of course, there's the browser view, which may be helpful. You're using a device that doesn't have the suite on it, and let's assume you have permission to use this device to do this work, but and it's maintained. But the web piece is really useful when you don't have all the other stuff installed. Obviously, when you're using a web-based application as opposed to a full-blown application, you tend to lose a few features. It's a little bit lighter, but in the case of Teams, there's not that much you can't do with it. So yeah, there's all sorts of options to use the application.
Okay, great. All right, another question. What are Teams channels and how do I use them?
So Teams channels, so there's different ways to have conversations or engagement on Teams. So you'll have ongoing chats. So Jill's probably sick of it, but she and I have a chat that's all the time where it's just ongoing and we're just checking in with each other and sending little messages. Did you see this? What's going on with that? Where's the blog? Whatever. And so those conversations can be made as many as you want. There's also the actual team where you may create specialized teams that are just for groups of people. So for example, we have a management team channel where it's only for specific people who are invited. So and that other people can't see. And there are different ways to chop that up, I guess. And yeah, I mean, it's a really nice feature. You should be careful because I know this was how we felt about it at first, and we sort of pared back a little bit. There's a tendency to say, oh, great, well, I'm going to create 50 different teams for all these different groups. Well, there is the concept of too much, There's addition by subtraction, I guess you could say, where it's a good idea to not overwhelm people with teams. Some things may be better just to have a direct chat with as opposed to a full Teams channel where you have maybe a bunch of files and permissions set up. If I'm emailing Jill and I tell Jill that on my sandwich I want turkey and pickles and mustard or something like that, I don't think we need a whole Teams channel to talk about my lunch order. But there are back-end considerations and organization considerations before creating too many of them. So yeah, it's another useful feature of the product.
Okay, great. If there's any other questions, type them in, but it doesn't look like there's any more that have come in. So I think we can probably wrap up.
All right, great. Well, thanks everybody for coming today. If you found this information helpful, or maybe I didn't give you everything you needed to hear, about this product, I'm happy to have one-on-one conversations with anybody. Everybody, I hope stay safe out there. Obviously, it sounds like today, when I started the webinar, there was no snow on the ground, and now I just turned my head and there's snow on the ground. So be safe if you have to drive. Please have a great, and safe Christmas. And we look forward to seeing everybody next year. And I really look forward to seeing everybody on next month's webinar. So take care and thanks again.
All right, thanks everybody. And again, we'll be sending out the webinar later today.